A listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, The Golden Bachelor hit our TV screens this week and it's shed a new light on dating later in life. It's a rollercoaster ride with lots of hidden traps, but how hard is it to find love second or third time around? And what are the benefits and the negatives of dating when you're older? We'll find out in just a moment. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Friday, the 24th of October. Thousands of female Defence Force members are set to join a landmark class action against the Australian Defence Force, alleging widespread sexual violence, harassment and discrimination. The federal court action in Sydney claims women were groped, forcibly kissed, rubbed with a colleague's erect penis and subjected to unwanted sexual conduct by superiors while on duty. The class action covers incidents from November 2003 to May 2025 and includes members of the Army, Navy, Air Force and training institutions such as ADFA. It follows an unsuccessful attempt at resolution via the Human Rights Commission. 3 men have been arrested over the alleged kidnapping and murder of Sydney woman Kim Tran. The young mother was abducted from her Bankstown home in April and then allegedly stripped, shot dead and left in a burning car. Her 2 children witnessed the horrific attack, with one of them, an 8-year-old boy, also allegedly bashed. Investigators believe Tran's husband had stolen up to 80 kilograms of methamphetamine from a Sydney drug syndicate. Police say the arrests expose the violent inner workings of a secretive Vietnamese drug network. And a major betting scandal has rocked the NBA in the US, allegedly involving coaches, players and the mafia. More than 30 people have been arrested across 11 states after 2 separate FBI investigations. The first looking at allegations of rigging NBA markets. Here's US Attorney Joseph Nikela.
The non-public information included when specific players would be sitting out future games or when they would pull themselves out early for purported injuries or illnesses.
Authorities are also investigating allegations of underground gambling and rigged poker games, with technology so advanced it included X-ray poker tables, hidden cameras and contact lenses that could read cards. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on dating in midlife with author and columnist Kerri Sackville. After divorce, like thousands of other people, Kerri suddenly found herself single and back on the difficult dating scene. Kerri shares with us her advice, her life lessons, and how when she had almost given up after plenty of dating disasters, she finally found love. Kerri, thanks so much for joining us. What a great topic, dating and possibly finding connection or love later in life. Do you believe it's possible?
I do now. For a long time I didn't, but I do now. I've been in a relationship with a fabulous person for a few years, but I was on the dating scene for close to 9 years after my divorce, and let me tell you, it was bleak.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because you had written this brilliant book called Out There, sharing your experience, which I think is so important because people often think that they're going through something alone and no one else experiences it. For you, going back out into that frightening dating world after your divorce, what was some of the challenges you faced?
Oh, there were so many challenges, and the book is more than just my experience. It's a guide because I truly made pretty much every mistake that was possible to make on the midlife dating scene. It is really different dating at this age. You know, I was in my mid-40s when I became divorced, and I'm now in my mid-ish 50s, moving towards late 50s. And I wanted to be able to have a book that I wish I'd had access to. So we're talking about kind of more macro issues like meeting the wrong people and getting interested in the wrong people, getting excited about men way too soon and thinking there's something in this when it becomes very clear very quickly that there's not. And then little things like agreeing to meet someone for a 3-course meal on the first date. you should only be meeting for a very quick coffee because so often it kind of goes south really quickly. Learning how to do things like a reverse image search, because people my age, we hadn't been on the apps. I mean, there weren't apps when I was dating for the first time. So learning actually how to find out whether the man that I think I'm talking to is who he says he is. So you actually have to do some research, going out in public, asking the hard questions. That was something that it took me a long time to do, because I think when you haven't dated in a long time, it's natural to be sometimes overly trusting. You've been surrounded by your girlfriends. You don't understand that people can and do lie or misrepresent themselves. So being able to ask the really hard questions, and also, I guess, being able to hear the answers. So often we kind of hear what we want to hear. We see what we want to see, and we're colluding in lying to ourselves. So being on the dating scene, you have to be really tough with yourself and be prepared to see reality as it is and not how you want it to be.
How did you see dating and meeting someone in your mid-40s compared to what you were like when you're in your early 20s? Like, what's the major difference?
There are so many differences. I mean, for a start, I had 3 children. So there's me as a person. I had kids. My priority wasn't necessarily just another adult. My priority was my 3 kids. I had the traumas that come from being in a long-term relationship that ends in divorce. Everybody on the dating scene, there are very few people on the midlife dating scene who've never been in a long-term relationship. The vast majority have been in relationships that have ended or, unfortunately, like the Golden Bachelor, been widowed. And then, of course, I'm dealing with a group of people who all have baggage like me. And you see a lot of people on the midlife dating scene who will say things in their bio like, no baggage, please. And you're thinking, if you can get to your mid-40s, let alone mid-50s or 60s without baggage, something is very wrong. Everyone has baggage. It's just a question of, I guess, how well you're carrying it and how well your baggage matches with someone else. So in my 20s, I was dating young men, and they might have had stresses at uni or work or difficult relationships with their parents, but that was where it ended. And when you're dating middle-aged men, let me tell you, the traumas, the histories, the sadness, the grief, the anger, the frustration, the depression. I mean, you are meeting a group of people who have a lot of stuff to work through. And one of the differences when you're dating men as opposed to women is women tend to leave marriages, they've got kids a lot of the time, and we tend to do the work. We tend to kind of do the emotional labor to get ourselves okay before we start dating. Whereas you find a lot of men on the midlife dating scene will be exiled from a marriage because most often they've been left, because men tend to leave relationships themselves of their own volition when they've got someone else lined up. So you get a lot of men who've been left and they are bewildered. They don't have the kind of relationships with other men that we have with other women. So they don't have a great support system. They're not necessarily in therapy. So they are looking for women basically to be, a lot of the time, they're unpaid therapists and deal with, all of their emotional stuff that they're working through. So I was dating these men who would kind of get into their stuff on the first date, and I would have men literally in tears about their divorces or about their children who they're estranged from. I'd have men who were just desperate to find somebody else really to look after them because they'd never, ever been by themselves and didn't know how to move through the world as a single person. A lot of really broken people. And it was very rare to meet somebody who'd kind of got himself together and was like a really well-functioning human being, unfortunately.
In regards to that, and you make a great point, Kerri, that it seems through your experience, most women that are leaving relationships think, okay, what did I do wrong? How can I improve myself? It's all about saying, look, there's always no one's just primarily the reason that a relationship breaks down. It takes 2 to tango. What do you think the roadblock is for a lot of men not to be able to do that work on themselves, thinking, okay, how can I be a better person?
I think a lot of the time these are men, again, we're talking about my age group, so men who are now in their 50s or beyond, men in the 60s. And I think when we were growing up, men didn't have a lot of those emotional tools. They weren't taught them. They were taught, men are men and you swallow down your feelings and you don't cry. And for a lot of men of this age group, their one significant emotional connection is with their partner. And when that relationship ends, they're completely lost. And they either haven't done therapy, or sometimes they did marital counselling and obviously it didn't work because they're now single, and they don't talk to their mates. And so it's really difficult for them to suddenly get in touch with their feelings and be able to seek help. There's still a big stigma, for men in this age group to actually do therapy and do the work. And they, I guess, are conditioned to then turn to a female to help prop them up and to help, I think, save them almost. And so you found a lot of men who really were just looking for the next relationship, and very, very quickly, you would just meet them and they would be almost treating you like a wife. I had men who'd send me photos of their kids, after the first date. And it's because that's what they used to do with their wife. It's really sad. But I think someone like the Golden Bachelor, who's been widowed and who then had to single parent his children, was forced into a position where he had to look after himself and he had to kind of be a bit self-sufficient. I have seen so many men just leave a relationship and immediately, instead of looking for a therapist, look for another partner.
And jump straight back into another relationship.
Yeah, when they're not actually in good working order, and you need to be in good working order to make any kind of relationship work.
For you, at your point, and we mentioned at the start of the conversation, you have found somebody, and I love talking about the positives as well as the challenges. For you, where did you meet and when did you think, we talk about red flags, what people, big warning signs, but what were the green lights for you thinking, hey, this guy is amazing?
Yeah, I did a lot of online dating, and I actually did not meet my partner online dating. And one of the problems with online dating is that it forces you into a position where you have to make a decision almost immediately. Is this someone I want to pursue a relationship with, or someone I think I can pursue a relationship with? And that's a really artificial kind of construct. I mean, you can't meet anyone and decide in that second, is this going to be a good life partner? But you don't really have the luxury of just getting to know each other. You have to decide, are we going to start dating? So I actually met my partner through a work function, and we stayed in touch, and we became friends at a point where I'd pretty much given up on dating. He'd pretty much given up on dating. And I hadn't had any situation like that in the past, in the past 9 years that I was dating, where I just got to know him slowly. We were friends. There was no pressure. We'd both kind of decided we weren't looking for anything. And by the time it became romantic, a good period of months where we'd been meeting regularly for coffees had passed, and we had that solid foundation of friendship, which is so important. And I just, by that stage, I'd given up on all my criteria. So that people on the dating scene, you have to kind of come up with a checklist, because otherwise, how do you sift through these dozens, sometimes hundreds of people on dating apps? So my checklist was, he needed this level of education, and he needed to look this way, and he needed to have this many children. And that was all just almost, I guess, arbitrary. And by the time I met my partner, I decided that the only things that were important were, A, I had to really enjoy his company. So it didn't matter what he did or what he looked like. I just had to really enjoy being with him. And 2, I had to feel emotionally safe. And so up until that point, I'd met lots of really interesting men whose company I enjoyed, but I didn't feel safe with them, because either they weren't safe people, or they didn't treat me respectfully, or they just weren't ready for a relationship. And then the men who were safe, I didn't particularly enjoy their company. I found them boring or dull, or we just didn't click. So he was the one person who met both of those criteria, and he's nice to look at too, which helps. It's not going to always be there, hopefully, as we go to the sunset together, but it helped at the time.
And for you, Kerri, the other big complication when we're dating later in life is, especially when there's children involved, when do you introduce the children? Because that is such a big step, and it's such a huge emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. Your guidebook for others going through this, when is that point when you think, okay, it's time to introduce my children or I meet their children?
You're right. It's such an important issue. And there's two ways of looking at it. Some people say they're not going to introduce somebody to their children until they're absolutely sure that there is a future with this person, and that's valid. But then the problem with that is if they don't get on with the kids, or the kids take an instant dislike to them, which happens, then you've got a whole other kind of kettle of fish happening. And I do know several people whose families kind of tried to blend, and it was a complete disaster, and it was the end of the relationship. So for me, what I did is introduced him quite slowly and sort of this is just a friend, this is a person I know, and rather than making a big production of, this is the man I, plan to spend my future with. But I can tell you, 2 of my kids were okay with him, and one of my kids, for whatever traumas had happened before, did not want a man in the family, was very threatened by that idea. And so we had to proceed really, really slowly. And at the beginning of our relationship, I remember thinking I would just be happy if they can be in a room together and that my child can feel comfortable with him in a room. And we proceeded so slowly and with such care and I think sensitivity to my child, because I really do believe the kids always have to come first. And now, they meet up alone, and all my kids will call my partner if they, want a question asked, or sometimes just to have, as they put it, a sensible person around. Apparently I'm not that, which I feel is a bit hurtful and unfair. But so it worked out really well, but it was a very softly approach. And I think the problems can come if you introduce the kids and say, this is my new partner and you're going to deal with it whether you like it or not. And I think that can be really threatening and difficult for kids, even adult kids, because adult kids still have a lot of feelings about their parents' divorce or when, a parent has passed away.
And so for you, Kerri, the golden bachelor moment, the fact that, look, dating midlife, later in life is really tough, but there can always be a silver lining, right?
That's exactly what I think. But I think sometimes finding that silver lining can be a bit more like finding a needle in a haystack than, a glorious rainbow.
And also experiencing a lot of dark clouds. It's a great story. Congratulations on finding this great partner, and thanks for joining us, Kerri.
Such a pleasure.
That was columnist Kerri Sackville. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'll be back tomorrow with the weekend briefing. And on tomorrow's ep, Antoinette is joined by best-selling author Matthew Riley.
I write contest. I'm 19 when I started. I send it to all the major publishers who all reject it. And I'm disappointed for about 10 seconds. And I think that the right person hasn't read it. So I famously self-published contest and got it into bookstores. I went to stores and asked to speak to the manager and said, "Hi, my name's Matthew Riley. This is my book." 2/3 of them said yes. And one of them was the Angus and Robertson store on Pitt Street. And into that store walked the commissioning editor of fiction from Pan Macmillan, one of the companies that had rejected it.
And who have published your most recent book.
They've published me for the last 27 years.
Oh, they're the same publisher.
They've been great.
We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. See you next time.